will introduce our speakers tonight. We are extremely grateful to have Mercede Rogers and Erin Pehar here tonight. We really look forward to hearing their thoughts and perspectives about some of the benefits of spending time on extended canoe trips in lots of interesting places, far away from major cities, quite remote. Right now, Mercede is the director at Camp Wanapate, and Erin is the owner and director at MHO Adventures. And I think collectively they bring an incredible amount of experience and passion for paddling. So we are so grateful to have them here tonight to share what they'd like to share. And we look forward to a great conversation afterwards. Take it away.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you everyone for being here. I see some familiar faces and some new faces and familiar names, so thanks for taking the time to hang out with us on a Wednesday. So as Liz mentioned, we know that this is the title of our presentation. However, especially considering who's on the call, I think that the amazing part about the next little bit of time that we have together is that it can go to a lot of different places. So we do have this slide deck that we're happy to share with everybody afterwards. So we might not go through every word that's in it, but we're happy to send it out afterwards, and we would love the discussion. Some folks sent in some questions in advance, which is wonderful, which is also really helpful because I think for both Erin and I, this is one of the topics that's really near and dear to our hearts, both professionally and also personally. And so we could probably talk about each of these slides for a whole evening, but we'll get right into it. Erin, do you want to start with that one and then we'll go in?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It was nice to hear Liz say conversation so many times because that's exactly what I feel like tonight will be. There's a lot of people that have just as much experience as we do, but we're going to talk tonight and explore all of the benefits of extended backcountry canoe trips, as well as a lot of the challenges that we're facing in today's world with putting them out and also getting people to join us on them.
So just a little kind of overview. And again, if you do know Erin and I, sometimes we deviate, especially if you ask us a question, we might end up going off on a tangent. So this is also here, this outline is to help us also stay on task. So we'll share a little bit more about each of us, what we do, the benefits of the trips. And as Erin mentioned, many of you on this call could also probably be delivering this webinar. And so we might move through those a little bit quicker so that we can get to that kind of into the weeds about where some of the challenges and incredible successes come from.
Great, thanks, Dave. So a little bit about me. As Liz mentioned, I am currently the owner and director of MHO Adventures. We're based out of Huntsville, Ontario currently. MHO was founded in 1990 and operated out of Northern Ontario for quite some time. I was actually born and raised in Toronto. Neither one of my parents have ever slept in a tent in their lives. True story. But my grandmother grew up at a hunt camp and insisted that my parents expose all of their children to it because it is in our blood and someone's going to take to it. And with that, mom picked up a brochure at the local YMCA and sent me to YMCA Camp Pinecrest at the age of 6 for 3 weeks, having no idea that it was a canoe tripping camp. And the rest is history. I'm a grad of Fleming College Forestry, followed by Parks and Recreation. I've got, aging myself here, but more than 20 years of experience in the industry. And I grew up at Pinecrest and I was there for upwards of 25 years in every role you could imagine, from 6-year-old camper all the way to general manager of camping and outdoor education for the Toronto YMCA. I traveled the world working in this industry as a contract guide for many years, and then came back and was drawn to Ontario Lakes and Rivers, and really wanted to be back on the front line. I'd been in management for quite some time at a pretty young age and landed myself at Outward Bound Canada. And I was a year-round program director and lead instructor for Outward Bound. Spent my winters dog sledding and my spring, summer, falls paddling mostly. I'm an Orca paddle instructor. I'm also a WMA instructor for Wilderness Medicine. Have 2 young boys and a dog. I've recently joined the board of directors for the Friends of Des Moines. and many other things. But what I love, so I attended a couple webinars in the past weeks, and some of them were presented by friends and some of them folks that I didn't know, but really that networking piece. So I have reached out and connected with some folks that I met on these paddle get kids paddling webinars. So hopefully we've opened that door, and if ever you want to reach out, feel free.
Awesome. Thanks, Pehar. And I think too, on that kind of connection piece, one of the amazing things, as many people on this call have realized, is that the paddling community in Ontario can be quite small. And I think one of my favorite things about preparing for this was having the opportunity to reconnect with Liz and to spend some time with Pehar and really diving into why we're still doing what we started doing from a very young age. And there was something about it that just kind of connected or touched each of us in different ways. And it's wonderful to be able to now come back together. And it's almost like this full circle opportunity. And I'm really grateful to Liz and Get Kids Paddling for creating these organic opportunities for people to come together, whether for the first time or those of us that have known each other for a while. And I love thinking about that common thread that we're all sharing something that we care about. And so for myself, my name is Mercede and I use she, her pronouns. I grew up in North Bay, so the outdoors just was sort of part of what happened. When you were young, similar to Erin, I got kind of shipped off to camp at a young age. And from there, never really looked back. Spent some time as a teacher. I did my Bachelor of Ed at Queen's in the Outdoor and Experiential Ed program, which some folks probably know. And that was a really wonderful, again, connecting opportunity to meet a lot of folks. And from there, I went on to teach in classrooms, outside of classrooms, guiding, tripping in all different seasons, whether that was winter camping through Lake Temagami with Appleby College or working at the York School and traveling the world with kids, guiding them in different experiences. Spending time on long canoe trips definitely became a huge passion of mine, both professionally when I started working as a guide and running trips of 6 or 7 weeks in length, and then also becoming a trip coordinator and a trip director, where then helping others go out on their multi-week expeditions, which is something that Pehar and I think live vicariously through our staff and our campers every summer, and would love to be out there with them. And then also as a mom, being able to head out with my husband, Mike, who's from the Sudbury region, and our kiddos. And we've been really fortunate to be able to do a number of month-long trips with our kids from a very young age up until now, and watching them grow and find their own ways that they connect with the outdoors has been really, really powerful. So yes, I'm currently at Wanapitei and feeling very fortunate to be able to have that opportunity. And I've been there for a few years now and continue to be inspired by all of the amazing people that I get to work with. Some of them are actually on this call, which is really wonderful to see them and to be able to have time to share the things that we love. I'm on the board of directors for the Friends of Temagami, and yeah, we could keep going. I think for Erin, like Erin and I have worked together, we've worked for one another, we've raised our kiddos together. It's a really wonderful opportunity to be able to share this stage with you, Pehar. So thanks for that. And yeah, so what we do, a little bit more of what we do into the kind of nitty gritty. We'll tell you a little bit more about each of our organizations and companies, and then we'll go from there. So back to you, Erin.
Perfect, thanks, Aid. So MHO Adventures is an adventure tourism company, like I said, based out of Huntsville. And we've recently kind of narrowed down our business to have 3 core departments, if you will. We actually currently have 3 websites as well. So we do commercial guided trips in the summer, and that could be families, adults, couples, friends, individuals join our trips. And we have a bunch of those posted on our website, anywhere from 3 to 26 days in length. Those trips range. And we also do a lot of custom programs. So we work with either this dad wants to do a trip with a bunch of buddies and their sons, or organizations. We've worked with Tip of the Toes, which is cancer survivors, young adults in remission, and we take them out on an expedition. We have a partnership with Moose Cree First Nation and Ontario Power Generation. And we take those folks on, we do some training, first aid training and whitewater paddling training in the spring. And then we take them on the Matagami Moose Rivers and they paddle home. And we work with a lot of school groups in the spring and fall seasons doing class trips or educational programs all across Ontario and Quebec. We also have a training sector. So we built a 42-day guide training program. This is year 5. It starts in less than 4 weeks, called River Routes. And that program was built out of a need as an employer to have quality trained individuals entering the industry. So we were seeing a void. Lots of folks were doing 2- and 4-year college university programs and were applying for jobs with organizations like ours and still didn't have the training and experience necessary for an entry-level position with someone like MHO. So we worked during COVID and built out this program, which has been very successful. And included in that program is a 21-day expedition. And we get asked a lot, why 21 days? Why does it have to be so long? And our answer is like, something magical happens at a certain point in a canoe trip. And the program coordinator, Rihanna Sturck, some people might know, says anyone can fake it for 7 days. But once you go a little bit past that, it becomes your life, and there's a change and there's a movement both within yourself and within the group. And under that training sector, we have River Routes, but we also run Paddle Canada, Orca, and WMA courses, both here at our site, and we bring courses to other organizations. And then we have our expedition food service. So we do wholesale dried food. We brought dried eggs to the retail market as well as hummus. We do full food outfitting for other organizations. And we're currently in the final stages of building a meal planning software, which I haven't said that out loud to a group of people as of yet, but it will launch very soon. And that's been a large undertaking over the last couple of years. So we've got our commercial guiding, our training, and our food service. Yeah, and our mission is to offer innovative and unique expedition-based opportunities for a diverse range of clients. We have some great partnerships with a number of First Nations. So that's also, I think, what sets MHO apart from some other organizations, is that we do have a lot of cultural immersion programs. I think that sums it up. I could talk forever about MHO, so you can call me up another time.
You too. Well, I know that it's amazing. It's wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So Wanapitei, so now we're switching gears into the youth focus mostly, and Camp Wanapitei offers all gendered flatwater and whitewater canoe trips for ages 7 to 18. So from the age of 7 to 13, you're on flatwater locally, and then when you enter that sort of 14-year age, that's when you start heading out into your whitewater trips. And that concept of progression is something that Erin and I will touch on a little bit later. The lengths of trips that we have do range from 2 nights for our youngest kiddos up to 56 days. And the base location that we have is located in Dakimanan on the Peshabo family territory. It's an incredible space. We're really, really fortunate to be able to be there and recognize that we are able to be there because others are not and have been removed from that space. And that's something that we take really seriously as an organization and work really closely with the Temagami First Nation and Temiagama Anishinaabe people to ensure that we are continuing to develop those relationships in a reciprocal way. And we have some really wonderful connections there that we really take very, very, very dear to our heart. From that base location in Dakimanan, we're heading out onto some incredible spaces all across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. So typically Ontario near Quebec rivers, which Erin and I will touch a little bit on, sometimes over into Manitoba. And for our longer expeditions, we are heading into Northern Canada and have a bit of overlap with where MHO would go. Actually, with all of these opportunities, there's some overlap there. And again, similar to Erin, looking at not just how we're traveling on the land, but what that actually means to be a traveler by canoe, and what are those connections to not only the land, but the people that you might be coming across and whose land you are actually traveling on. So again, working hard to try to continue developing relationships with First Nation communities, when and if possible, and Erin's also helped out with that. And that is one of our, I would say, core values of our organization, along with being able to create that all gendered space where everyone is able to come together and celebrate being able to be on canoe trip together. It's a pretty remarkable thing. Our mission is, as missions go, to foster through the wilderness canoe trip this sense of adventure, self-awareness, confidence, compassion, and deep connection to the natural world. So really, it is through the canoe trip that we are helping to shape and develop the qualities of young people for the future generations, right? And how can we work on that transference of skills from being on that canoe trip and translate that back into our everyday life. And that's also where these extended opportunities to be out there for a longer period of time is where you can really dive deep into some of those growth opportunities. And it's just the most incredible place that I've ever worked. The staff members are unbelievably inspiring. And I've never worked anywhere where the people truly like embody the value system. And it's really quite remarkable. So yeah, come by. We do have a family camp for younger folks, for young at heart folks, for 1 week in July and 1 week in August as well. So yeah, happy to chat more about that anytime. And then for this, like for the purpose of this presentation, Erin and I were trying to nail down like what is an extended trip, right? Because that's a little bit of a subjective thing. That is there a day, right? Does it go from 9 days is not extended, but 10 days is? And what we sort of landed on as we were discussing it was it could be very individualized. So for somebody benefiting from being out on trip, maybe 8 days is actually quite long for that person, and they're able to hit the benchmarks of what may happen for somebody else on day 20. So for the purpose of this presentation, though, we are talking more like multi-week expeditions, because some of the challenges, some of the successes, there is a difference in terms of the planning, both mentally and logistically, of what goes into putting something together that is, past that sort of week-long opportunity that you might have. So we just wanted to round that out. And we know that many of the folks on this call also have experience with those multi-week pieces. So we'd love to hear from you when we get into it.
Great. So this is where we jump in. We have a number of slides that outline a lot of the benefits of being out in the backcountry in the wilderness for an extended period of time. A lot of them are, I think, the more common sense, if you will, and can also be achieved elsewhere. So we're going to go through these slides quite quickly. And if you have questions, reach out, but the slide presentation will also be available. So obviously, physical health benefits. So exercise and fitness, outdoor exposure. We participated as a family in the 1,000 Hours Outside challenge last year. And once we got to the nice weather, my kids are like, Mommy, like, we live outside. You got to stop with the phone. Like, I was trying to track it. And they're like, we're 24 hours a day when we're on canoe trips. So truth. And then there was debate about whether when you're sleeping in the tent, you're outside or you're inside. But definitely all the fresh air and physical activity. The other thing that's nice about it is that it's a physical activity that's kind of subconscious, because you're going through, it's not like, okay, I have to go to the gym. And it's also not competitive, which I really love when we're out there, especially with some of our school groups. You see different kids shine than you do in the classroom, but kind of subconsciously physically active.
I think from the youth camp perspective, in terms of the mental and emotional health benefits, I think that's something that a lot of the staff and I agree is coming to the forefront of being probably the priority for a lot of us, of being able to head out there and be at probably your bravest and also your most vulnerable at moments, and knowing that there are others there that can help lift you up and move through that with you, and support you, and then being supported by the natural environment around you. So those benefits, and there's obviously a lot more research that is coming out and will, I'm sure, continue to come out about the benefits of not just being able to be immersed in an experience, but also with a group of people, and what does support really look like for young people. So we couldn't stress that enough. For leaders as well, you're going to see that getting into a rhythm, and that does really improve their own mental health as well, and build their confidence and their judgment and decision making. So incredible opportunities there.
I look at these pictures and it just makes me smile.
Right?
And it's pretty hard to put into words the connection with nature and explain that piece to people that have never experienced being out there. Um, and just the awareness that comes along with having nature as your home, right? Like this is where you're living, and you're just so much more aware of, like, that's my son and my husband picking blueberries. And I remember getting to that campsite and they were like, oh my God, we haven't had fresh fruit in like a week. And I don't know how long we stayed there and how many Nalgene's they filled with blueberries. But then we had a lot of really little kids on that trip, and like listening to their conversations about food and the importance of it, and gathering it ourselves, and then talking about how much work it was and how long it took and how fast they disappeared, and really just connecting all those pieces together, pretty unbelievable. And then again, with the leave no trace practices, like, it's kind of embedded into a lot of us, and you just kind of, without thinking, you get to a campsite and you notice straight away. And now I notice, I'll speak probably a lot about my kids because I'm with them all the time and they come on a lot of canoe trips with us, but they notice constantly garbage in the outdoor world, like just around home. We live in the bush, we live on 20 acres. So the dump in our backyard and these kinds of things. But really, I can really see, and it's pretty huge to see that real deep connection and awareness, and like kind of experiential learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. And I think too, when I read that last part, that lifelong commitment to protect the planet, and whether we are out there for one night or 56, that having the opportunity to connect with something that then hopefully inevitably means you care about it, we do tend to protect the things that we care about. And so being able to have more opportunities to be out there, also hopefully for future generations, will ensure that this place will continue to be cared for in the way that it has been from the first peoples on this land. And that's something that I think we all do take really seriously. And I know that Erin really hits that home with MHO as well. Yeah. We mentioned a little bit about the idea of groups coming together, and I know it might look a little bit different if you're on, a client guided trip as an adult versus as a child, but really at the end of the day, there's that sharing of common theme of we're doing the same things every day. Like whether you're an adult or you're a child on a trip, you are still portaging and carrying your gear and paddling in that headwind and, dealing with that rain, or finding that incredible beach campsite and getting your Helinox chair out and just relaxing and like feeling the vibe. And so that opportunity to build those bonds, and often with strangers, right? Like it's not necessarily that we know the folks that we're heading out there with, but being able to form connections with folks that maybe otherwise you would never cross paths with, I think is also super powerful. And being out on canoe trip gives you that opportunity to show that part of yourself and be that authentic self in ways that sometimes that's difficult for us to do back home. And I think when we're talking about the extended opportunities, when we do start spending more time out there, and many of you may have felt this way, where you start feeling those layers kind of peeling off, and eventually you are your most authentic self. And whether that's also dictated by the minimalist environment in terms of how much you've packed and stuff, it helps you slow down, and it helps you think about those parts of yourself that you do want to share in a social way and in a community. And that's a pretty important thing, I think, in terms of strengthening those relationships, both on trip, and then how can you bring that back to your regular, you always hear this like real world, right? Whereas I think for Erin and I, we exist in the real world all the time, and these canoe trips are as real as it possibly gets. But that notion of the escape from the modern life, the disconnection from technology, we notice, especially for our young folks, being able to be out there for a few weeks at a time, you are almost relearning, especially for some of our campers that have gone through COVID and have had to actually be separated from folks. There was a lot of relearning what it means to share space with people, whether that was sharing a tent, sharing a canoe, overcoming challenges, resolving conflict, which would be very natural, right, for 14-year-olds to have conflict with one another. But learning those tools and developing those tools when you're out for an extended period of time, it really does give you that opportunity to continue building those growth opportunities and that toolkit for you, and getting away from the screens is a pretty vital piece right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And we have some quotes at the end, but it's really interesting for me working with a lot of adult clients, because whenever we say like digital detox and screen break, it's often referred to in like a school environment or a summer camp environment with kids and overlooked in the adult community. And the amount of adults that more addicted, but that I've had just break down in tears on canoe trips after a couple days, and like a husband and wife team where she was like, holy cow, like I haven't seen this person in 20 years. And just really that true connection, and face to face, like living in the present, like so many of us really don't anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want
Okay,
to do this?
expanding, yeah, sure. So the cultural piece, which is very near and dear to both mine and Sadie's hearts. I have a really strong connection with the twin communities of Moosonee and Moose Factory. And we have been, MHO as an organization has been paddling into those communities and running programs in those communities for multiple decades now. We have local Cree guides on our staff team, actually in our River Roots program this year, which is so phenomenal. We did it. And actually, one of the things I do is I take my kids' teachers, I offer them to come on guided trips each year, and a number of them have chosen our Moose Factory trip. And one of them said to me after that trip a couple of years ago that she learned more in the 48 hours that she was in community with us than she has in 30 years of professional development through the public school system. And that felt really good, because it's true, to be in community is so different than what we can learn from textbooks. And we've, like I said, built a strong relationship. Many of our trips start and travel through First Nations lands and communities. And I think most organizations these days are pretty conscious of respecting that history and building awareness, and land acknowledgements have become quite common. And one of my staff had a really great line, and I wish I could remember it. Maybe I'll try and find it next time Sadie's up. But we really kind of live that. Example of that is I have a school group that does our Moose Factory trip, has done it a number of times, and they asked if we could do a trip that ends in a different reserve next time. I was like, wow, okay, we need to talk. But really, pretty passionate about a deeper understanding and having people actually experience and learn from our Indigenous folks and travel to these communities and on these lands. So
yeah, thanks, Erin. A lot of opportunities there, and we're still learning about that. And I know it's funny you mentioned like school and for the teachers, and sometimes when the kids arrive, it's like, yes, you thought that you were getting a break from school, but you're certainly not getting a break from the learning. Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. The concept of building resilience, and when I look at the slide, sometimes I feel like there's like these buzzwords that are around, right, of like the importance of risky play, and everyone here knows of the benefits of that, and that building resilience piece. But for me, when I think about the extended, and I mentioned this a little bit before, is there's this theory, Erin, you had said something about like around like a day 21, or there's this opportunity of just where everyone just settles in, right? And you wake up one morning and all of a sudden everything is smooth and things are happening, and you have found your footing, right? You've been grounded. And one of the organizations that I used to work for, they have their progression is a 3-week trip. There's a 22-day, a 36-day, a 42-day, and then a 50-day. And you build in this progression. And there's a lot of folks that, on day 21, they wake up that morning and they know this is it for me. Like that was enough. That was good. But I always feel like on that day 21, that's where, and it's day 21 is maybe like a, you can insert whatever day, but there will come a day where you will know if that's long enough for you. And that's where some folks are like, I could keep going, where that journey does then become your life. And where in terms of problem solving and in terms of developing judgment, you are making different decisions, right? If you're leading a 5-day, if you're participating in a 5-day, the decisions that you're making will probably be very different than if you're leading, on a 36-day. And I think even when I think of some of our leaders, it's like they're heading out on a 2-night. I don't even know if they brought their sleeping bag. They're just like, well, I'll be back in a couple days, right? As opposed to knowing that it's day 3 of 50. And so if this gets wet now, or if I get injured today, the longer term impact, right? So it's helping you develop that projection, that longer term problem solving, and developing your judgment in a different way than I think those shorter trips give you opportunity for. And Erin, I love what you said of, anyone can do. I mean, anyone, and we're being a bit facetious there because we know that's not certainly.
You can fake it. You can fake it for 7 days.
But that's where I think, like, when we talk about like the training later on and the staffing, it's, there are fair weather guides, and then there's guides that are going to be able to go through all of the different weather systems that are coming at them. And I use weather as a more of a metaphor for anything. So that concept of, I think Bob Henderson calls it the middle, right? This concept of once we do settle in, and once those layers are stripped away and we're all just our most authentic, vulnerable, honest selves, that's where that incredible amount of personal growth and group teamwork growth happens together. And that is really, really powerful. And you see that in the way that the relationships perform, and right? And I remember talking to our parent group and our camper group before they were heading out on their 56-day. And I was saying to the families, like, you're going to look different when you come back. And it's not so much in the muscles that you're going to gain, but there will be something. There is a look. And I get kind of tingly every time I talk about it, because I know other people on this call know what I'm talking about, of just that confidence and that strength and that unbelievable beauty that comes from being able to be out there for that long, where it is your life. I think is incomparable. And that to me is where, when I think about, coining these buzzwords, that part, I don't even know how to put that into words, really. But that's one of the reasons that I think it's so incredibly moving and powerful. So how do we do all of this? And that's kind of the part of our presentation where we just kind of wanted to lay that little bit of groundwork. And certainly how we accomplish this might look a little bit different between the companies, obviously, because we are doing slightly different things, but there is always a progression that's included. So as I mentioned earlier, with Bon Appetit, typically campers are coming to us at a younger age and moving through the program. It's not always that way. We certainly have campers from other camps that perhaps that camp only offers flat water options, or perhaps that camp only goes to a certain length of trip and they're now wanting to expand and explore. But regardless of the background, there is going to be a progression of skill. And that might be just ensuring that participant is properly prepared for entering into that trip. I don't know what progression for you, Erin, and if you want to touch on that at all, or any.
Yeah, we have, we rate our trips on our website. So beginner, intermediate, advanced, moderate, and we explain what those things mean. So we hope that folks place themselves accordingly. We screen folks on forums, we follow up with calls, but we also do have a lot of returning clients. So on a trip, we'll recommend, or now I'm getting emails like, this guide last summer recommended that the Des Moines would be fantastic for me, or the Mississippi would be great. So there is still that progression in level of difficulty, and also length of time. Like, we have a lot of people that have never been in the backcountry, and some of them want to jump right onto our 17-day. And I'm like, okay, well, my biggest question is, are you comfortable sleeping on the ground and pooping in the woods? Because everything else will be okay, so long as you're okay with learning our systems for that. So there is still that progressional piece. Skilled, certified, and experienced staff, which is becoming increasingly difficult for us. And I think industry-wide, I talk to enough people regularly, have been contacted from different college and university groups. Enrollment in outdoor rec programs is dwindling. I have a good friend that is head of outdoor rec at a university. And curiously enough, he said out of his entire class, 90% of them, when it comes to the canoe trip part, they all try and get out of that piece. These are huge challenges in the industry. I think we're all still working on navigating them together and figuring out why, and hopefully we're kind of on the hump and coming down the other side. But
yeah, I think so. I do think that Wanapitei and MHO in particular do have a very high standard in terms of their staffing and what we're looking for. And I say that quite confidently because we have had staff that have worked at MHO and vice versa. And Erin and I talk a lot about what industry standard is and then how we exceed that and why, right? And why that's important to us. Obviously, the group's ability in terms of how we're planning the trip is going to come into play. Folks on this call know what's going into that planning and prep part, the exceptional risk management. And then I put these other 2 points in terms of how we accomplish this, because really for at least for Wanapitei, if having the support of the community, and by community, I don't just mean the communities that we're going to, that is extremely important, but also the internal Wanapitei community or MHO community that has a high risk tolerance, right? And is in support of these opportunities, recognizing that when you're talking about multi-week expeditions, 56 days in the far north, there are some very serious inherent risks in what we do. But knowing that that community is behind you and works with you to ensure that we are mitigating those risks to the best of our ability, but recognizing there is always the what if, and yet still continuing to encourage us to forge ahead. So that's really important, because without that support, it would be a total uphill battle, I think. And having that acknowledgement that what we do, sometimes I think we forget this, is that when we're totally immersed in the industry, it might just be like, oh yeah, we're doing another 26 day, or we're doing another 14 day, or another, but then you realize how incredibly exceptional that is. With all of the camps, there's a number, and Erin might speak more to the companies, but there are a number of wilderness tripping camps that are doing phenomenal multi-week canoe trips all over, and that's remarkable. And I think we really need to be aware of that and be really grateful that we do have those opportunities still with us. So that's for me some of the ways that it stands out of how we accomplish what we're doing. Anything to add to that, Erin? I kind of went on a tangent.
No, that's great.
Those
are the things we do to try and accomplish it. Moving into challenges, which there are a lot of challenges these days, and I've been in this, so I've owned MHO since 2008. And it's quite shocking to see how much challenges are increasing, and all the roadblocks and things like climate change. This picture here, the forest fire that was on the Wind River in the Yukon last summer. My guides called me from the sat phone and were like, okay, so can you look at the map? Like, there's a fire really close to us. I think we're okay. And I wish they could have sent me this picture at the time, but they tried to explain the whole situation and I was looking at maps. But yeah, fire and floods have been huge factors, and to the point where like schools now are booking and they're like, okay, what's your plan D? And I was like, well, I don't have a plan D. We're 6 months out. If I had to make backup plans for fires and floods for every single one of our trips, as we get increasingly closer to departure date, we will continue to watch, and that's when we'll make alternate plans if we need to. So that's a huge one that's increasing, but there's also increasing challenges with enrollment and costs. Like, it's no secret, everything is more expensive. So our trips are much more expensive for our clients and our campers, but also our costs. Like, I just got my insurance renewal last week, bad time of year because I can't increase my trip costs now. And it went up 35%. Which is shocking. And these are things that, like, we don't have a choice. We have to carry this massive insurance policy, but our clients don't really fully understand why our prices and I'm pretty transparent with folks, but all these increasing costs, and then food costs, that we know, gas, everything costs more, and therefore our trips cost more, and staff cost exponentially more than they did even 5 years ago. So that's a huge one. And then I often have the conversation with people. It's like, well, how much are people going to be willing to pay to go on a 21-day or a 26-day expedition? And I get really discouraged. I'm like, well, and talk to folks like, I don't know if many people know Jim Coffey, but he's a big whitewater rafting guy. And I really get terrified when I talk to him, because he talks about rafting in the early 90s versus whitewater rafting, he says, is now dead. And he tells me that whitewater canoe trips and extended canoe trips aren't far behind. And this is terrifying and really upsetting for me, and I don't want to believe it. And enrollment, like our enrollment for summer is way down, and people keep asking me why, and I don't know. That said, enrollment on our courses for our trainings and our courses is off the charts. So trying to understand that, I'm not quite sure. A devastating piece is when we got youth groups, custom groups. They will often, in the last couple of years, 50 to 75% show up, and the rest sometimes the morning of, oh, they didn't want to come. Oh, they just said that they weren't comfortable. They couldn't leave their phone. They couldn't leave their friends. And that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm like, if that was my kid, I'd be just put him on the bus. Whose choice is it? So that's a different world, and people are like, well, it's a different world than you grew up in. Your world doesn't exist anymore. That piece, staffing, I feel very, very fortunate that we don't yet have a problem with staffing. Very fortunate. We have a lot of returning staff. We're not an entry-level position, but I know industry-wide staffing is becoming an issue. There are still the effects coming out of COVID, where we kind of lost that internal knowledge, with a lot of organizations in camp not being able to operate for a number of years. And so those kind of more senior staff either went elsewhere, went back to school, found other jobs, and then coming out of COVID, we were missing a huge piece, and that mentor piece was missing and was quite challenging for a number of years. We're still feeling the effects of that, but as I mentioned earlier, enrollment is down in outdoor rec programs, so we're breeding less. Hopefully River Roots is going to start filling that gap, and Thompson Rivers University has a great program. There are a couple programs popping up that are a little bit more condensed and more intense, if you will. Logistics are really crazy, as you can imagine, and those of us that have executed these kinds of programs. And I'm laughing because my general manager was starting to work on logistics today, and she was knocking her head at all the roadblocks, specifically Ontario. We run trips Canada wide, but specifically Ontario, with the parks and the booking systems, and the fact that organizations don't have any way other than the same way as the general public to book permits and such. And there are a number of us that are kind of trying to have those conversations with people that can make decisions, that we should be able to book a group and book our sites without putting everybody's name on the permit in March, because our trips aren't full, but we're hoping they will. Same with trains, planes, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. The impacts on the local community. This one is really interesting, because Sadie and I were talking about this today too, and I talk about it a lot with my staff and also with my friends that live and work in these northern native or non-native communities, and the constant internal battle with wanting to support the communities, but also not wanting to strain their resources. So a good example would be our 26-day ends in Moose Knee and Moose Factory, and we spend 3 days up there at the end. So oftentimes staff will say, well, I don't have to pack food for my last 3 days because I'm going to be in community. We can go to the grocery store and we can buy a bunch of fresh fruit and vegetables. And my first response is like, well, no, they only get a food car every 2 weeks. So we're kind of drawing on that community supply if we rock up and purchase food for 14 people for 3 days. That's really going to have an impact on the community and possibly not a positive one. But please bring all your money and let's go to the market in the mall where all the elders are selling their handmade crafts. And let's support the community that way. And we'll go over to Wayne's house and we'll grab some of his furs. And really, interestingly enough, I've been told firsthand from these folks and these elders, and we run a trip up there with some schools and we call it a service trip. And the parents are always like, well, no, like we have to go to Africa and build an orphanage and that's our service. And trying to explain, well, we don't have to go outside of our own country to realize that there's huge poverty and lack of resources. But the service piece of this trip is to go home and have these conversations. And elders, and I am now in a position where I can like coach people in the community on what I want them to say based on stories they've told me in the past. But yeah, definitely being kind of mindful of our impacts on local community, both positive and negative, and kind of trying to differentiate those two, because spending money in community, positive, but it might not be depending on what resources you're drawing on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we were chatting about that one as well, of the potential of if and when there's an emergency and if you need to rely on the services in a local community. Fire being a great example of, if you do have a community that's being evacuated or close to that, and you're close by and you also need support, or have you now pulled valuable resources from the local folks that do also need it? So yeah, lots of discussions. I'd love to hear folks take on all of these challenges as well on the call. The access part we put specifically for the longer trips, because with the logistics, with some of the things that we're talking about here, certainly the longer you're out there, it's more complicated. There are more things to be figured out, and that the access part is not only how you're accessing those rivers or those lake systems, but also how you're accessing your group in the event of an emergency. And that is also a challenge of what does that look like in terms of your own resources to be able to get to a group. Yeah, so maybe I'll stop there. And I'm sure I'd love to touch on this again. There we go. So yeah, we just tossed in a couple of lovely little wonderful things that folks tell us after our trips. So you can read that, and I hope that all of you on this call have been on the receiving end or been able to say something like this over time, because it's yeah, it's really wonderful. Being part of a community that actively lives their values, coming home confident and proud. Yeah, overcoming tough few years.
I think the one that stands out, so this was the adventure I didn't know I needed. That was from a client who was dragged on a trip by a friend. And those are often the most powerful testimonials we get, are from the folks that didn't really want to go, or didn't realize what they would get from it. Because all of us here know, like, oh yeah, it's great. Like, even on the weekends, I'm like, oh yeah, it's pouring rain, it's awful, but I know I need to go outside. Like, I can feel it. I need to just be outside for a while. And then my 5-year-old smartass says, "Mommy, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing." I'm like,
nice, Emerson. Yeah.
Thanks, Emerson.
Yeah.
But some people don't, like, they don't live outside like we do, and they don't really know what that feels like. So
I think one of the things too that we can't forget about is that the impact for folks, or the potential impact, will come to you at different times, right? It's a different journey for everyone. And you might finish the trip and immediately be able to put that into context and reflect on that and name something about it. but for some it might be weeks or months or years, right? And we also don't necessarily know what someone's going to hold on to from those trips. It could be something potentially so inconsequential that happened, like the day that you sang when it rained all day, or the simple things that you remember. And one of the long trips that I led in 2004, it was a 50-day trip, and every year since then, so over 20 years ago, on the day that that trip departs from that camp, my co-leader that I led that trip with texts me every year since that, on that day, just saying, miss you, love you, thank you, kind of thing, right? And it's the kind of thing where you're going to end up with some of these folks at their weddings or holding their babies, or celebrating, grieving with them, mourning losses. Like, these opportunities that we have don't always come to us, I guess. Sorry, the benefits of those opportunities don't always hit us right away. So these were just a couple like little snapshots, but we also know that hopefully we're all still learning from the experiences that we have. I know that I certainly am. And one of the things that I found particularly incredibly moving about working with young people is that they do make me feel more like I have to be more responsible, right? It helps me step up as a person and be a better person. And that's something that's kind of hard to quantify or put into a quote, sort of. Yeah. I guess that's it, Erin. We have time for questions.